In the dusty heart of Arizona territory, a little girl's whispered plea would change 3 lives forever. When 6-year-old Lily Caldwell looked up at a struggling saloon waitress and asked, "Can you be my mama?" Her widowed rancher father stood frozen, watching a wound he thought he'd buried crack wide open. What followed was a journey of unexpected connection, desperate fear, and a love that refused to stay silent. A waitress with nothing left to lose, a man who'd forgotten how to hope, and a child who saw what they couldn't, that sometimes family isn't found in blood, but in the quiet moments when broken souls recognize each other. This is their story. The autumn wind swept through Dust Creek like a wandering ghost, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant rain. The Silver Spur Saloon stood at the edge of the main street, its weathered wooden sign creaking on rusted hinges. Inside, oil lamps flickered against walls, stained with years of smoke and whiskey, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. Rose McAllister moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her calico dress faded from countless washings, an apron tied tight around her narrow waist. She was 26, but carried herself with the weariness of someone much older. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple braid, a few loose strands framing a face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so tired. She had just finished clearing a table when Martha Henley, the saloon owner, touched her shoulder. "Rose, your father's asking for you again." Rose's hands stilled on the tray she was holding. She nodded once, throat tight. Her father, Samuel McAllister, had been the town sheriff for 20 years before a riding accident left him bedridden. Now he lay in their small room above the saloon, his mind slipping further away with each passing week. Some days he knew her. Most days he called her by her dead mother's name. "I'll check on him after the evening rush," Rose said quietly. Martha squeezed her arm. "You're a good daughter." Rose wasn't sure about that. She only knew how to keep moving, keep working, because stopping meant feeling everything she'd lost. The saloon door swung open, and a gust of cool air rushed in. Rose glanced up and saw him, James Caldwell, owner of the Broken Arrow Ranch. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair, touched with silver at the temples. His clothes were clean but worn, practical, a rancher's clothes, not a showman's. He removed his hat as he entered, and that's when Rose saw her. The little girl clutched his hand tightly, her eyes wide as she took in the saloon's dim interior. She couldn't have been more than 6, with wild chestnut curls escaping from beneath a small bonnet and a face full of freckles. Her dress was simple but well mended, the hem dusty from travel. Jim Caldwell's eyes swept the room before settling on an empty table near the back. He guided his daughter there, his movements careful, protective. Rose had seen him in town before, always quiet, always alone except for the child. Folks said his wife had died 3 years back. Some said it was fever. Others whispered it was complications from childbirth that never quite healed. Rose approached their table, pulling out her small notepad. "Evening, Mr. Caldwell. What can I get for you?" Jim looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. His were gray, like storm clouds, and held a depth of exhaustion she recognized all too well. "Coffee," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "and milk for Lily, if you have it." Rose nodded and turned to the little girl. "We've got fresh milk from the dairy just this morning. How does that sound?" Lily looked up at her, and something in those blue eyes made Rose's breath catch. It wasn't fear or shyness. It was hunger, not for food, but for something deeper, something nameless. "Do you work here every day?" Lily asked softly. "Most days," Rose replied, smiling gently. "Why do you ask?" Lily's gaze didn't waver. "Because I wanted to remember your face." The words hung in the air, strange and innocent and utterly sincere. Jim shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Rose felt something twist in her chest. "Well, I'll be right back with your drinks," she said, her voice a little unsteady. As she walked toward the bar, she felt the little girl's eyes following her, and for reasons she couldn't explain, Rose felt the ground beneath her shift, just slightly, just enough to know that something had changed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. A storm was coming. Over the following weeks, Jim Caldwell and his daughter became a familiar sight at the Silver Spur. They came on Tuesdays and Fridays, always in the late afternoon when the saloon was quietest, before the ranch hands and drifters rolled in for the evening. Jim always ordered the same thing, black coffee and whatever stew Martha had cooking that day. Lily always asked for milk and cornbread with honey, and Rose, without fail, was the one who served them. She told herself it was just coincidence, that Martha assigned tables randomly, but deep down, she knew better. The older woman had a way of seeing things, of knowing when people needed each other, even if they didn't know it themselves. Rose kept her distance at first, offering polite smiles and quick service. She'd learned long ago not to get attached to customers, not to let anyone in too close. But Lily made it difficult. The girl watched her constantly, not in an unsettling way, but with a quiet fascination, as if Rose were something precious she was trying to memorize. Sometimes Lily would draw pictures on scraps of paper Jim brought from the ranch, and she'd leave them on the table when they left. Little sketches of horses, wildflowers, and once, a woman with long hair standing beneath a tree. Rose kept that one folded in her apron pocket. One Friday evening, as Rose brought their usual order, she noticed Lily coughing, a dry, rattling sound that made the child wince. "How long has she been coughing like that?" Rose asked Jim, concern creasing her brow. Jim looked up from his coffee, as if noticing for the first time. "Started this morning, probably just dust from the trail," but Rose saw the way Lily tried to hide it, pressing her small fist against her mouth. She set down the plates and disappeared into the back room, where Martha kept supplies. She returned moments later with a small tin cup filled with steaming liquid. Wild cherry bark and honey, a remedy her mother had taught her years ago. "Here, sweetheart," Rose said, kneeling beside Lily's chair. "This will help. It doesn't taste like much, but it works." Lily took the cup with both hands, her eyes wide. She sipped carefully, then smiled. "It tastes like summer." Rose's heart squeezed. "That's the honey talking." Jim watched the exchange in silence, something unreadable passing across his face. When Rose stood to leave, he spoke quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Rose said, meeting his eyes. "I wanted to." The next Tuesday, when Rose arrived for her shift, she found something waiting for her on the bar, a small bundle wrapped in burlap and tied with twine. Martha grinned. "Caldwell dropped it off this morning. Said it was for you." Rose unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 3 jars of wild honey, golden and thick, still warm from the sun. A note was tucked beneath the twine, written in a neat, masculine hand. "For your kindness. The bees thank you too, Chitsi." Rose stared at the jars, her throat tightening. It wasn't flowers or jewelry or anything romantic. It was practical, thoughtful, a rancher's way of saying thank you. She brought the honey home and placed it on the small shelf above her father's bed. That night, when Samuel McAllister woke confused and calling for his long-dead wife, Rose made him tea with the honey and sat beside him until he drifted back to sleep. Later, as she lay in her own narrow bed, listening to the wind outside, she thought about Jim Caldwell's gray eyes and the way Lily had looked at her, like she was something worth remembering. Rose closed her eyes and told herself not to hope. But hope, like the wind, had a way of slipping through the cracks. The following Friday, when Jim and Lily arrived, Rose caught herself smiling before she even reached their table. And when Lily reached out and touched her hand, just briefly, just a brush of small fingers, Rose didn't pull away. Something was growing between them, fragile and unnamed, and for the first time in years, Rose wasn't sure if she should run from it or let it bloom. It started with a simple question on a cold November evening. Jim stood at the bar, hat in hand, while Lily waited at their usual table. He cleared his throat, and Rose looked up from wiping down glasses. "Miss McAllister," he began, then paused. "Rose, I was wondering, Lily's been struggling with her letters. The schoolhouse is too far from the ranch for her to attend regular, and He stopped, jaw tight. "I'm not much good at teaching. Would you consider coming out to the ranch? Once or twice a week? I'd pay you, of course." Rose's hands stilled on the glass. "Mr. Caldwell, I don't know if—" "Please," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her look up. "She asks about you. All the time. Says you're patient and kind, and she needs that right now." Rose glanced past him to where Lily sat, swinging her legs and humming softly to herself. The little girl caught her eye and waved, her face lighting up. "Just reading," Rose said finally. "Nothing more." Jim nodded, relief visible in the set of his shoulders. "Just reading." The first time Rose rode out to the Broken Arrow Ranch, the sun was setting over the distant mesas, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. The ranch house was simple but sturdy, built from adobe and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Lily met her at the gate, bouncing on her toes. "You came. You really came." Inside, the house was clean but sparse. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and simple furniture filled the space, a table, chairs, a worn sofa. But it was lived in. Drawings covered the walls, and a stack of books sat on a side table. They settled on a woven rug near the fireplace, and Rose pulled out the primers she'd borrowed from the general store. But Lily was more interested in talking than reading at first. "Do you live in town?" Lily asked. "Above the saloon," Rose said. "With my father. Is he nice?" Rose smiled sadly. "He used to be, now he's tired." Lily nodded solemnly, as if she understood more than a 6-year-old should. "My mama was tired too, before she went to heaven." Rose's breath caught, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm sure she loved you very much. Papa says she did, but I don't remember her face anymore." Lily looked down at her hands. "Does that make me bad?" "No, sweetheart," Rose said gently, reaching out to tuck a curl behind the girl's ear. "That just makes you human." Over the following weeks, the lessons became easier, more natural. Lily learned her letters quickly, sounding out words with fierce concentration. But more than that, she talked about the ranch, the horses, her dreams of having a garden like her mama used to keep, and sometimes, in the middle of a sentence, she'd lean against Rose's shoulder, content just to be close. One evening, as Rose was packing up to leave, Lily said something that stopped her cold. "Miss Rose, Mama, can you help me with this word?" Rose froze. "What did you call me?" Lily blinked, confused. "Miss Rose, Mama, that's your name, isn't it?" Rose's throat tightened. She should correct her, she should draw a line, but looking down at those hopeful blue eyes, she couldn't. It's fine," she whispered. From the doorway, Jim had been watching. He'd come in from the stables and stood there, hat still in hand, completely still. He saw the way Lily curled into Rose's side, saw the way Rose's hand trembled as she smoothed the child's hair, saw something he hadn't seen in 3 long years, his daughter at peace. That night, after Rose had ridden back to town, Jim sat on the porch staring out at the darkness. Frank, his ranch hand, joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "She's good for the girl," Frank said simply. Jim said nothing, but his hands gripped the cup tighter. Inside, Lily slept with a smile on her face, dreaming of a woman with gentle hands and auburn hair, who smelled like lavender soap and made her feel safe. And in town, Rose lay awake, terrified of how much she'd begun to care. The creek ran clear and cold that Sunday afternoon, winding through a grove of cottonwoods whose leaves had turned to gold. Rose had agreed to take Lily on a walk while Jim rode into town for supplies. It was the first time they'd been alone together outside the ranch, and the freedom of it made Lily almost giddy. She skipped ahead, picking up smooth stones and examining them in the sunlight before tossing them into the water. Rose walked behind her, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the autumn chill, watching the girl with a softness she hadn't known she possessed. They found a fallen log near the water's edge and sat together, their feet dangling above the creek. For a long while, neither spoke. They just listened to the water rushing over stones and the wind moving through the trees. Then Lily's voice came, small and serious. "Miss Rose, Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart. Can I tell you a secret?" Rose turned to her. "Of course you can." Lily stared down at her hands, fingers twisting together. "Sometimes at night I see her." "See who?" "My mama." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "In my dreams. She never talks, but she holds me real tight, and she smells like—" She paused, leaning closer to Rose's shawl and breathing in. "Like you, like soap and wildflowers." Rose's heart stumbled. "In my dreams, I can never see her face clear," Lily continued. "It's always fuzzy, like when you look through water. But I know it's her because I feel safe." She looked up at Rose then, her blue eyes impossibly earnest. "I used to think it was just pretend, but then Papa brought me to the Silver Spur, and I saw you." Lily --. "I prayed every single night," the girl said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I asked God to send me a mama, someone who'd stay, and then you were there, and you smiled at me, and you made that medicine for my cough, and—" Her small hand reached for Rose's. "I knew it was you. I knew you were the answer." Rose couldn't breathe. The words settled into her chest like stones, heavy and undeniable. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "You make me feel like she did in my dreams," Lily whispered. "Safe." Rose pulled the girl close, wrapping her arms around her, feeling the small body press against hers. She buried her face in Lily's hair and fought back the sob building in her throat. What she didn't know was that Jim Caldwell stood 30 yards away, hidden behind the cottonwoods. He had finished his business in town early and ridden back to find them gone. Frank had pointed him toward the creek, and he'd followed, intending to join them. But when he heard Lily's voice carrying across the water, he'd stopped. Now he stood frozen, one hand gripping the reins of his horse, the other pressed against a tree trunk for support. "I prayed every single night." His daughter's words cut through him like a blade. He'd tried so hard, tried to be everything she needed, father and mother both. He'd learned to braid her hair, even if it came out crooked. He'd learned to cook meals that didn't burn. He'd held her through nightmares and wiped away tears and read her stories until his voice went hoarse. But he couldn't give her what she needed most. He couldn't be soft the way a mother could, couldn't teach her the things his wife would have taught her, couldn't fill the shape of the absence that lived in their home like a ghost. And now, watching Rose hold his daughter, watching Lily melt into her embrace with a trust and peace he'd never been able to provide, Jim felt something crack wide open inside him. It wasn't jealousy, it was relief and terror, and something else he didn't dare name. His eyes burned, his jaw clenched. He turned away before they could see him, leading his horse back toward the ranch in silence. That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep, Jim sat alone on the porch. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, cold and distant. And for the first time since his wife died, James Caldwell allowed himself to feel the full weight of his loneliness. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November, delivered by the stagecoach along with the weekly mail. Rose found it waiting for her at the general store, her name written in formal script across the front. She stood in the dusty street, staring at the envelope as if it might bite her. The return address read, St. Catherine's Teaching College, Santa Fe, New Mexico Territory. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Dear Miss McAllister, we are pleased to inform you that your application has been accepted. Furthermore, due to your exceptional circumstances and the recommendation provided by Reverend Thomas, You have been awarded a full scholarship to our teacher training program, including room and board." The words blurred. Rose read them once, twice, 3 times. She had applied 6 months ago, before Jim and Lily had ever walked into the Silver Spur, before everything had changed. She'd done it on a whim, a desperate prayer thrown into the void, a way out of Dust Creek, a way to build something for herself beyond washing dishes and watching her father fade. Now the answer had come, and it felt like a noose. That evening, she went through the motions at the saloon, pouring drinks, serving meals, cleaning tables. But her mind was elsewhere, caught in the terrible mathematics of choice. If she stayed, what was she? A waitress in a saloon, caring for a dying man, living in a single room with no future beyond tomorrow. She had nothing to offer anyone, least of all a child who deserved better. If she left, she could become something, someone, a teacher with a real profession, a real life. She could send money back for her father's care. She could build the kind of future her mother had wanted for her, but leaving meant abandoning them. The thought made her physically ill. When Friday came, Rose wasn't at the Silver Spur. She'd asked Martha for the day off, claiming her father needed her. It wasn't entirely a lie. Jim and Lily arrived as usual, but when they didn't see Rose, Lily's face fell. "Where's Miss Rose, Mama?" she asked Martha. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral. "She needed to tend to some personal matters, honey. She'll be back soon." But Martha knew. She'd seen the letter in Rose's apron pocket, seen the haunted look in the girl's eyes. She knew what was coming. That night, Rose sat in her small room above the saloon, a single candle burning on the table. Her father slept fitfully in the next room, murmuring names she didn't recognize. On the table before her sat 2 things, the acceptance letter and a half-written note. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, I regret to inform you that I can no longer continue Lily's lessons. An opportunity has arisen that I must pursue. Please know that teaching your daughter has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. She is extraordinary, and she will do wonderful things. I wish you both every happiness. Sincerely, Rose McAllister." The words were formal, distant, a coward's goodbye. She folded the letter and sealed it with wax, her hands shaking. Then she began to pack. 1 carpet bag, that's all she had. 2 dresses, a shawl, her mother's Bible, a few personal items. As she folded her clothes, something fell from her apron pocket, the drawing Lily had made weeks ago. The woman with long hair standing beneath a tree. Rose pressed it to her chest and finally let herself cry. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that it was better to leave now before Lily got more attached, before she made promises she couldn't keep. Better to slip away quietly than to watch their faces when she told them she was leaving. She told herself this was mercy, but deep down she knew the truth. She was running. Running from the terrifying possibility that she might actually be wanted, that she might actually belong somewhere, that she might actually be enough. By dawn, her bag was packed and her letter sealed. The stagecoach to Santa Fe left on Monday morning. Rose had 3 days to disappear. Monday morning came cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that promised snow. Rose stood at the edge of town near the stage depot, her carpet bag at her feet, her father's pocket watch clutched in her hand, the only thing of value she owned. Martha had tried to talk her out of it the night before. "You're making a mistake, girl," she'd said, eyes fierce. "That child loves you. And Jim Caldwell looks at you like—" "Like what?" Rose had snapped, more harshly than she'd intended. "Like a convenient substitute? Like someone to fill a hole in his life? Like someone he's afraid to lose," Martha had finished quietly. But Rose had already made up her mind. The letter had been delivered to the ranch Saturday morning. She hadn't returned to the Silver Spur since. She'd spent Sunday sitting with her father, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes lucid, mostly not. "You're leaving," he'd said at one point, his eyes suddenly clear. "I have to, Papa." He'd squeezed her hand weakly. Your mother would want you to choose love, Rose, not duty. But he'd fallen back asleep before she could answer. Now, standing in the cold morning air, Rose watched the stagecoach being loaded. 2 other passengers waited nearby, a merchant and his wife, neither paying her any attention. She heard boots on the dirt road behind her and turned. Jim Caldwell stood there, hat in hand, his coat unbuttoned despite the cold. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those gray storm cloud eyes, were red-rimmed and raw. He didn't say anything at first, just walked closer until he stood an arm's length away. You weren't going to say goodbye, he said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Rose's throat tightened. I thought it would be easier. For who? She couldn't answer. Jim reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. He held it for a moment, looking down at it, then extended his hand toward her. It was Lily's hair ribbon, a faded blue piece of silk, worn soft from years of wear. The one she wore every single day, the one her mother had tied in her hair the morning before she died. She wanted you to have this, Jim said, his voice breaking slightly. She cried herself to sleep last night, asked me why you didn't want to be her mama anymore. Rose's hands flew to her mouth, a sob escaping despite her efforts to contain it. I told her you had to go, Jim continued, stepping closer, that you had important things to do, that sometimes people have to leave even when we want them to stay. He pressed the ribbon into her trembling hand. But she made me promise to give you this, said you might need something to remember her by. Rose stared down at the ribbon, her vision blurring with tears. The fabric was soft, warmed by Jim's pocket, and it smelled faintly of sage and sunshine, smelled like Lily. I can't give her what she needs, Rose whispered. I'm nobody. I have nothing. You have everything, Jim said roughly. You just can't see it. The stage driver called out, boarding for Santa Fe. Jim took a step back, putting distance between them. His jaw was clenched tight, his hands curled into fists at his sides. I won't ask you to stay, he said. That's not fair to you. But I need you to know, his voice cracked. You weren't just convenient, Rose. You were never just convenient. He turned and walked away before she could respond, his shoulders rigid, his stride purposeful. He didn't look back. Rose climbed into the stagecoach with the ribbon clutched against her heart. As the horses began to move, she looked out the window one last time. Jim stood in the middle of the street, watching her leave. Behind him, Dust Creek spread out small and dusty and impossibly distant already. The stagecoach rolled forward, and Rose sat back against the hard wooden seat, Lily's ribbon pressed to her lips, her heart breaking with every mile. She had chosen safety over risk, certainty over hope, and it felt like dying. Santa Fe was everything Dust Creek was not, bustling, sophisticated, full of opportunity. The teaching college sat on a hill overlooking the plaza, its adobe walls warm in the afternoon sun. Rose's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over red-tiled roofs. She should have been grateful. She should have been excited. Instead, she felt hollow. The first week passed in a blur of orientations and introductions. The other students were younger, mostly girls fresh from their families, eager and bright-eyed. They chattered about their futures, about the schools they'd teach in, the lives they'd build. Rose smiled and nodded but said little. At night, she lay in bed holding Lily's ribbon, running the silk through her fingers until sleep finally came. Her dreams were always the same, a little girl with chestnut curls asking, "Why didn't you want to be my mama anymore?" She'd wake with tears on her face. 3 weeks into the term, a package arrived. Rose found it waiting on her bed when she returned from class. Brown paper wrapped with twine, her name written in careful letters across the front. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Inside was a small book, homemade, the pages stitched together with thread. The cover read in crayon, My Book of Dreams by Lily Caldwell. Rose opened it slowly. The first page showed a drawing of the Silver Spur Saloon. A stick figure with long hair stood behind the counter, a smile on her face. The second page showed the ranch, horses, a house, and 3 figures holding hands. One tall, one small, one with auburn hair in the middle. Page after page, Lily had drawn their time together. The lessons by the fireplace, the walk to the creek, the moments Rose thought had been ordinary but that Lily had treasured like gold. On the last page, Lily had written, in her careful, uneven script, "Miss Rose Mama, Papa says you had to go do important things, but I miss you every day. I pray for you every night. If you ever want to come home, we are still here. Love, Lily." Beneath it, in different handwriting, steadier, masculine, was a single line. "The door is always open, J." Rose sat on the edge of her bed, the book cradled in her lap, and wept. She wept for the fear that had driven her away, for the belief that she wasn't enough, that she didn't deserve to be wanted, for the 3 weeks she'd wasted trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. She thought of her father's last coherent words, "Your mother would want you to choose love, not duty." She thought of Jim standing in the street, watching her leave, his voice breaking as he said, "You have everything. You just can't see it." She thought of Lily's prayer, "If you ever want to come home, we are still here, home." The words settled into her chest like a key turning in a lock. Rose stood, wiping her eyes, and began to pack. The college administrator was understanding when Rose appeared at her office the next morning. "Are you certain?" the woman asked. "This opportunity may not come again." "I'm certain," Rose said, and for the first time in weeks her voice didn't waver. She sold her father's pocket watch to pay for the stagecoach fare back. It hurt to let it go, but she knew he would have understood. Some things were worth more than gold. The journey back to Dust Creek took 2 days. Rose spent them staring out the window, watching the landscape shift from city to desert to the familiar rolling hills of home. She clutched Lily's book against her chest and rehearsed what she'd say 1,000 times. But when the stage finally rolled into Dust Creek and she stepped down onto the dusty street, all her prepared words vanished. Because there, standing outside the Silver Spur with Martha beside him, was Jim Caldwell. He'd been waiting. Their eyes met across the distance, and Rose saw everything she needed to see: hope, relief, and something deeper, something that had been growing between them all along. She took a step forward, then another, and began to run. Rose didn't stop running until she reached him. Jim caught her, his arms wrapping around her as she collided with his chest. For a moment neither spoke. They just held each other in the middle of the dusty street, while Martha watched from the saloon doorway, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I'm sorry," Rose whispered against his shirt. "I'm so sorry. I was afraid." "I know," Jim said, his voice rough. "I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "When Martha told me you were on the stage, He stopped, overcome. "Rose, I need you to understand something. This isn't about convenience. This isn't about finding someone to care for Lily. This is about you, about who you are, and what you mean to both of us." "Where is she?" Rose asked, looking past him toward the ranch road. "Where's Lily?" "Home," Jim said. "I didn't tell her you were coming. I didn't want her to hope if—" He couldn't finish. Rose touched his face, her palm against his rough cheek. "Take me home, Jim." They rode together on his horse, Rose sitting in front of him, his arms around her as they guided the mare toward the Broken Arrow. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. When the ranch house came into view, Rose saw her, a small figure sitting on the porch steps, chin in her hands, staring out at nothing. Jim reined in the horse at the gate. "Lily," he called softly. The girl looked up, and for a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then recognition dawned, and she was running, stumbling over her own feet, her hair flying behind her. "Miss Rose, Mama," she screamed. "You came back. You came back." Rose slid from the horse and dropped to her knees just as Lily crashed into her. She wrapped her arms around the girl, burying her face in those wild chestnut curls, and let herself sob. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I left. I was scared, but I'm not anymore. I'm not going anywhere, I promise." Lily pulled back, her face streaked with tears. "You promise, promise? Forever promise?" Rose nodded, unable to speak. She kissed Lily's forehead, her cheeks, her hands. Jim knelt beside them, and the three of them held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, her hand clutching Rose's even in dreams, Jim and Rose sat on the porch together. The desert air was cool and clear, filled with the sound of crickets and distant coyotes. Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. He placed it in Rose's hand. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a simple gold ring, delicate and worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," Jim said quietly. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone, Rose. Not my wife, not Lily's mother. I'm asking if you'll build something new with us. Something that's ours." Rose stared at the ring, her vision blurring. "I don't have anything to bring to this. No dowry, no dash dash." "You have everything," Jim interrupted. The same words he'd said the day she left. "You have the biggest heart I've ever known. You have the ability to make my daughter laugh and feel safe. You have courage, even when you don't think you do." He took her hand. "And you have me, if you'll have me." Rose looked up at him, this rancher with storm cloud eyes who had never asked for anything, but had given her everything. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jim slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her, soft and reverent, full of promise. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep and smiled, as if she knew. Above them, the stars wheeled across the endless sky, ancient and constant. And on the porch of the Broken Arrow Ranch, 3 broken souls became whole. They had found each other in the dust and loneliness of the frontier, and together they had built something that would last, not perfect but real, a family, a home, a future written in love.